Imagine this for a moment. Right now, you can see the room around you because something invisible is moving across empty space at almost 300,000 kilometers per second, bouncing off objects, entering your eyes, and somehow turning into color, shape, and meaning in your mind. That sounds normal, only because you've lived with it your whole life. But if you stop pretending it's obvious and actually ask, what is that thing moving? The world starts to feel very strange, very quickly. Most people will say light is a wave. Others will say light is a particle. Physics textbooks say it is both. That answer feels clever, but it dodges the real question. What is light made of? And why does it behave the way it does? Let's start simpler than physics. Think of a lake. If you throw a stone in, ripples spread across the surface. The water itself doesn't travel across the lake, but the pattern does. That's a wave. Now think of a bullet. It travels from one place to another, carrying energy and momentum in a tiny package. That's a particle. Light acts like both of these at different times, which means it is neither in the ordinary sense. That's our first clue, that reality is deeper than everyday language. Here's a more careful way to think about it. Space is not empty. It is filled with fields, invisible layers of reality that exist everywhere. One of those is the electromagnetic field. Light is a disturbance in that field, moving through space at a fixed speed. Not because something is pushing it along, but because that speed is built into the fabric of reality itself. Light doesn't travel through space. In a sense, space allows light to exist only at that speed. Pause and ask, does this actually make sense? Yes, in a strange way. If you tried to run alongside light, you would never catch it, because the faster you move, the more space stretches in front of you and shrinks behind you. Light always stays ahead. The universe protects its speed limit. This leads to something uncomfortable. You don't experience time the same way light does. From light's perspective, no time passes between leaving the sun and reaching your eyes. Billions of kilometers disappear instantly. Distance is real to you, but not to light. That should make you feel a little small. Now let's go deeper. When you turn on a lamp, billions of tiny packets of energy, photons, are released. But these photons are not little glowing balls flying through space like tiny fireflies. They are momentary excitations of the electromagnetic field. They pop into existence, move, interact, and vanish again. So light is not a thing, it is a process. And this is where the human mind starts to struggle. Because we like objects, not processes. We like solid things, not patterns in invisible fields. That struggle is exactly the same one people have with money, success, and life. Here is the first uncomfortable truth. Wealthy people are not wealthy because they chase billions. They are wealthy because they avoid obvious stupidity for a very long time. Just like good physics is not about dramatic insights, but about refusing to accept bad explanation. Most people lose not because they are unlucky, but because they react emotionally to markets, to social pressure, to fear, to greed. Light doesn't panic. It follows the rules of reality precisely. Humans rarely do. Back to light. If you shine light through two narrow slits onto a wall, you get an interference pattern, bright and dark bands. That only happens with waves. But if you try to detect individual photons passing through, they arrive as discrete particles. Each photon seems to decide where to land, yet collectively they recreate the wave pattern. Here is the unsettling part. A single photon behaves as if it travels through both slits at once and interferes with itself. That means light is not located in one place until you observe it. It exists as a range of possibilities. Ask yourself honestly, does that make sense? Not intuitively, but it fits all experiments. Reality is probabilistic at the smallest scale. That is not a failure of measurement. It is how nature actually works. This connects to a second uncomfortable truth about success. Most people think control means certainty. In reality, intelligent living means accepting uncertainty while still making reasonable decisions. You cannot know the future, just like you cannot know exactly where a photon is before measurement. But you can understand the rules well enough to avoid disasters. Now consider why light has no mass. Objects with mass like you, a car, or a planet resist acceleration. They slow down, speed up, and can be at rest. Light cannot. It is always moving at the same speed because its existence depends on motion. If light stopped, it would no longer be light. That means light lives in a different category of reality than matter. Matter is stored energy. Light is moving energy. One is like a battery. The other is like electricity flowing through a wire. Most people assume solidity is fundamental. Physics suggests motion is. Think about that quietly for a moment. You are made of atoms, which are mostly empty space filled with fields and vibrations. Your body feels solid only because electromagnetic forces prevent atoms from passing through each other. In other words, your solid self is a negotiation between invisible forces. Here is the third uncomfortable truth about success. Most people focus on what looks solid: salary, job title, possessions, instead of what actually creates results: habits, thinking patterns, incentives, and patience. They chase appearances the way children chase shiny objects. Light doesn't care about appearances. It follows the underlying structure of reality. Now let's zoom out. The light from the sun takes about 8 minutes to reach Earth. When you look at sunlight, you are seeing the past. The sun could vanish right now, and you wouldn't know for 8 minutes. This is not just about astronomy. It is about causality. Effects lag behind cause. In investing, relationships, health, and learning, most people expect immediate results. When they don't get them, they quit. But light teaches a quiet lesson. Reality moves at its own pace, not yours. Another uncomfortable truth: patience often beats intelligence. A person of average ability who consistently avoids bad decisions will outperform a genius who keeps making reckless ones. Back to light, one last time. Some physicists now believe that space itself may be made of deeper informational or quantum structures, and light is how those structures communicate. In that view, photons are not things traveling through space. They are space revealing itself dynamically. That is a hard idea, but it matters. It means the universe is less like a stage with objects on it and more like a living pattern constantly unfolding. So what is light really? Not a wave, not a particle, not a substance. Light is the way the universe expresses electromagnetic energy across space and time. It is a moving relationship between fields, shaped by the deep rules of reality. And those rules are not designed for human comfort. They reward consistency, coherence, and patience, not drama, speed, or ego. When you look at a sunset, you are not just seeing colors. You are seeing the outcome of nuclear fusion, quantum mechanics, relativity, and cosmic geometry, all compressed into something beautiful. Your brain interprets as a tit. Most people see beauty. A few people also see structure. That difference is everything. Wealthy thinking is not about buying expensive things. It is about aligning your mind with how the world actually works, like understanding light instead of just enjoying brightness. Avoid obvious mistakes before chasing clever moves. Accept uncertainty without paralysis. Respect long-term cause and effect. Don't let emotion override logic, and stay within what you truly understand. Light follows simple rules consistently and creates breathtaking complexity. Humans do the opposite. Complex rules, chaotic behavior, and mediocre results. So here is a final question to sit with, quietly. If the most fundamental phenomenon you experience every day, light, is not what it seems, what else in your life might be misunderstood? Money, success, intelligence, time. Maybe the world is not wrong. Maybe our instincts are. And maybe the smartest thing you can do is slow down, look carefully, and let reality teach you the way studying light teaches physics. Because in the end, light doesn't need you to believe in it. It just is. And the universe keeps moving at its own speed, whether you keep up or not. So let's stay with that strangeness a little longer, because this is where thinking really begins. Imagine you are standing in a completely dark room. You turn on a flashlight. Instantly, the room appears. It feels as if light filled the space, like water flooding a container. But that is not what actually happened. Nothing flowed like a liquid. Instead, the electromagnetic field in that space changed its state, and your eyes interpreted that change as visibility. In other words, seeing is not passive. It is an interaction. Light does not simply exist out there. It exists in relationship to matter, to your eyes, to walls, to air, to atoms, without something to interact with. Light has no meaning. That is a subtle but important idea. Reality is not made only of things. It is made of relationships between things. And this is exactly where most people go wrong in life. They focus on objects, money, jobs, houses, cars, followers, and ignore relationships, incentives, systems, habits, time, and feedback loops. They think possession equals success, when in reality success is about how things interact over time. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Most people fail not because they lack opportunities, but because they misunderstand cause and effect. They chase results without respecting the process that creates them. Light respects process perfectly. It never cheats. It never shortcuts physics. It always follows the underlying rules, even when those rules produce bizarre outcomes. Now consider this thought experiment. Suppose you could slow down light, not with a trick in a lab, but in your everyday world. Imagine it moved at walking speed. What would you see? You would watch individual photons drift through space like glowing sparks. You could step between them. Shadows would stretch slowly instead of snapping into place. The world would feel dreamlike, elastic and strangely fragile. But notice something deeper. If light slowed down, your experience of time would also change, because vision is tied to the speed of light. You would perceive motion differently, distance differently, even causality differently. That means your sense of reality depends on one fundamental constant of the universe. You are not looking at the world directly. You are looking through a very specific physical lens shaped by light's speed. That should make you cautious about your own certainty. Most people assume their perception is objective. It is not. It is filtered by biology, culture, emotion, and physics itself. In markets, this leads to disaster. People panic when prices fall because their emotions tell them something is wrong, even when nothing fundamental has changed. They confuse appearance with reality. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Reacting emotionally to changing conditions is one of the most reliable ways to destroy long-term success. Stability comes from understanding, not from feeling. Now let's go back to photons. A photon has no mass, no size in the usual sense, and no internal clock. It is not aging as it travels across the universe for billions of years. From the photon's perspective, emission and absorption happen at the same moment. That is deeply strange. For you, time is everything. For light, time is almost nothing. This asymmetry tells us something profound. Your experience of reality is not universal. It is local, limited, and very human. If intelligent beings lived in a universe where light moves slowly, their entire philosophy of existence would be different. Their idea of cause and effect, memory, and identity would not resemble yours. And yet, you rarely question your own perspective. That is another trap in thinking and investing. People assume their worldview is natural rather than conditioned. They confuse familiarity with truth. Here is a quiet but brutal insight. If you had been born in a different country, different family, different economic system, you would likely believe completely different things about money, success, and morality. Light doesn't have that problem. It has no culture. It just follows physics. Now consider reflection. When light hits a mirror, it bounces back almost perfectly. But what is actually happening? The photons are absorbed by electrons in the mirror's surface and then re-emitted almost instantly. So reflection is not bouncing like a rubber ball. It is absorption and recreation. The mirror does not send back the same light. It produces new light that looks identical. That should make you pause. Even something as simple as seeing your reflection is a chain of transformations you never notice. Reality is continuously being reconstructed, not simply revealed. The same is true of knowledge. When you learn something, you are not copying truth from the world into your mind like a file download. You are reconstructing a version of reality inside your brain based on signals, interpretations, and prior assumptions. If your assumptions are wrong, Your understanding will be distorted, even if the information is accurate. Here is a hard truth about success that few people like to admit. Being smart is not enough. You must also have good mental models, or your intelligence will just help you make bigger, more confident mistakes. Light again offers a lesson. Early scientists thought light was either purely a wave or purely a particle. Both camps were brilliant. Both were wrong in a simple, fundamental way. They were attached to a single model instead of letting evidence reshape their thinking. In life, most people do the same thing. They pick a narrative. Rich people are evil, or hard work guarantees success, or the system is rigged, or markets are rational, and then force reality to fit that story. But reality does not care about your story. Light never compromised with human intuition. It forced physics to change. Now think about color. A red object looks red because it absorbs all wavelengths of light except those corresponding to red, which it reflects to your eyes. The redness is not in the object, it is in the interaction between light, matter, and your brain. Color is not a property of the world. It is a property of perception. That idea is deeply relevant to human behavior. We judge people as successful or unsuccessful, rich or poor, smart or stupid. But those labels are more like colors than facts. They depend on context, comparison, and perspective. A person who looks wealthy on social media might be drowning in debt. A person who looks ordinary might be quietly financially free. Appearances are reflections, not realities. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Most people are far more influenced by what looks impressive than by what actually works. They optimize for image instead of substance. Light does the opposite. It reveals structure, not status. Let's return to the double slit experiment. One last time, because it contains a philosophical lesson disguised as physics. When you observe a photon, you force it into a definite position. When you don't observe it, it exists as a spread of possibilities. In a way, attention collapses reality. In your own life, what you focus on shapes what becomes real to you. If you obsess over losses, you will feel like a victim. If you obsess over long-term progress, you will feel steady and capable. The world responds to your attention, not your wishes. Now think about darkness. We call it the absence of light, but in physics, darkness is simply a state of the electromagnetic field where no photons are present. It is not nothing. It is a different configuration of reality. That means emptiness is still structure. The same applies to silence, stillness, and patience in human life. Doing nothing is not meaningless. Sometimes it is the most powerful action because it avoids harm. Another hard truth, most people lose by doing too much, not too little. They trade too often, argue too quickly, change strategies too frequently, and never let compounding work. Light travels straight unless something interferes with it. Humans rarely do. So what is light, really, in the deepest sense? It is a messenger of the universe's rules. It carries information about energy, space, time, and matter. It connects distant parts of reality without physical contact. It reveals structure through interaction, and studying it forces humility. You begin thinking, you understand something simple. Brightness, and you end up questioning space, time, reality, and your own perception. That is what real learning feels like. Not confidence, but deeper clarity mixed with deeper mystery. Now step back from physics and look at your own life through this lens. If light is not what it seems, then maybe success is not what it seems either. Maybe wealth is not about luxury, but about freedom from stupidity. Maybe intelligence is not about speed, but about patience. Maybe control is not about certainty, but about understanding probabilities. Maybe growth is not about dramatic breakthroughs, but about quietly avoiding mistakes year after year. And maybe the world rewards consistency more than brilliance. Light does not try to impress you. It just follows simple rules relentlessly. And from that simplicity emerges everything you see. That is a model worth imitating, not in physics, but in thinking. Ask yourself more often, does this actually make sense? What are the incentives? What are the trade-offs? What am I missing? What would have to be true for my belief to be correct? Those questions are more valuable than any tactic. When you watch a sunrise tomorrow, you will still see beauty, But now you might also see something else, a reminder that reality is deeper, stranger, and more orderly than it feels. Billions of photons traveling across space, shaped by fields, constrained by relativity, born in nuclear fire, carrying ancient energy to your eyes in a fraction of a second of cosmic time. And your mind, built by evolution, stitching all of that into a simple picture called day. Light does not care whether you understand it. But if you try, it can change how you think about everything. And that may be the most valuable illumination you will ever receive. So let's push a little further, because this is where curiosity stops being entertainment and becomes a way of seeing the world. Think about a single beam of light traveling through empty space. There is nothing visibly carrying it, nothing visibly pushing it, nothing visibly guiding it. And yet it moves with perfect reliability, perfectly straight, perfectly consistent, obeying rules that were set long before you were born. That is not how humans behave. Most of our movement through life is messy, reactive, emotional, and full of detours. We zigzag where light travels straight. That contrast is important. Imagine you are walking through a forest at night with a flashlight. You see a narrow tunnel of illumination in front of you, surrounded by darkness. You probably assume that what you see is reality, and what you don't see is simply hidden. But that is backwards. What you are seeing is only the tiny portion of reality that happens to interact with light in a way your eyes can process. Everything else is still there, the air, the ground, the trees, the animals. But your awareness of it depends entirely on photons reaching your retina. In other words, visibility is not the same as existence. This is true in physics, and it is painfully true in human life. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Most people believe that if something is not obvious, it is not important. They focus on visible results, flashy wealth, viral success, dramatic wins, and ignore invisible foundations like habits, character, systems, and compounding. Light exposes only surfaces. Wisdom requires looking beneath them. Now consider shadows. A shadow is not an object. It is simply the absence of light in a region because something blocked it. Yet shadows feel real. They have shapes, edges, and meaning. In a sense, a shadow is defined more by what is missing than by what is present. That is exactly how many human failures work. Debt is not just money borrowed. It is future freedom removed. Bad habits are not just actions. They are opportunities you will never get back. Poor decisions are not just mistakes. They are entire paths in life that quietly disappear. Shadows teach you that absence can be as real as presence. Now let's return to the speed of light, because it is not just a number. It is a statement about reality. Nothing with mass can reach the speed of light, because doing so would require infinite energy. The universe has a built-in limit on how fast information, energy, and influence can travel. That means causality has a speed. You cannot affect something instantly across distance. There is always a delay, even if it is tiny. Most people ignore this in their expectations. They want immediate results from working out, immediate returns from investing, immediate recognition from effort. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Impatience is one of the most expensive traits a human can have. It leads to rushed decisions, emotional reactions, and long-term losses that could have been avoided with simple waiting. Light never rushes. It simply moves at its fixed speed, no faster, no slower. Now imagine light leaving a distant galaxy billions of years ago. That light traveled across an expanding universe, stretched by cosmic space itself, shifted toward red wavelengths, and finally arrived at your telescope tonight. You are literally seeing the past. That means when you look out into the universe, distance is also time. The farther you see, the further back you look. This has a quiet psychological lesson. When people look at successful individuals, they often see only the present wealth, status, influence, and ignore the long timeline that created it. They compare their beginning to someone else's middle. That comparison is deeply unfair and deeply misleading. Light forces you to respect time. You cannot cheat it, compress it, or pretend it doesn't exist. Now think about how light interacts with glass. The window lets light pass through, but it also reflects some of it. You can see both the outside world and faint reflections of yourself at the same time. That is a perfect metaphor for thinking. You can look outward at reality, but you always see a bit of yourself in the reflection. Your biases, your fears, your hopes, your ego. The challenge is learning to distinguish what belongs to the world and what belongs to your mind. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Most people mistake their emotions for insight. They feel something strongly and assume that feeling is a reliable guide to truth. It is not. Light is indifferent to emotion. It reveals structure, not feelings. Now consider this. When you see an object, you are not seeing it directly. You are seeing light that has interacted with it and then traveled to your eyes. That means your perception is always mediated. You never have direct access to reality, only to signals. This should make you skeptical of certainty. If even vision is indirect, why would your opinions about money, politics, or success be perfectly accurate? Humility is not weakness. It is alignment with how reality actually works. Let's go back to photons again. A photon can travel across the universe, interact with a single atom, and then vanish. Its entire existence might be billions of years of travel in one split second of interaction. That is both tragic and beautiful. Some things exist for long journeys and brief moments of impact. Human lives are not so different. You might spend decades learning, working, growing, failing, improving, and then have a few key moments where everything you built truly matters. Most people underestimate those moments. They treat life as continuous rather than punctuated by critical choices. Light teaches that impact can be brief, but decisive. Now think about rainbows. A rainbow appears when sunlight passes through water. Droplets and is split into different colors. White light contains all colors at once, but you only see them separated under special conditions. This is another subtle truth. Complexity is often hidden inside simplicity. White light looks uniform, but it is actually a mixture of many wavelengths. In human life, the same is true. A person who looks lucky may actually have a complex combination of discipline, patience, environment, and smart choices. The situation that looks simple may be driven by many invisible factors. Here is another uncomfortable truth. Most people prefer simple stories over complex reality, even when the simple story is wrong. They want villains, heroes, and clear causes. But the world rarely provides them. Light refuses to fit simple categories. It forces you to accept new ones. Now let's imagine something more radical. Suppose consciousness itself somehow interacts with light in a fundamental way, not just biologically through eyes, but at a deeper physical level. We don't know if this is true, but thinking about it is useful. If awareness shapes observation at the quantum level, then reality is not fully defined without observers. That does not mean humans create reality with their thoughts. It means participation matters. You are not separate from the universe you observe. You are part of the same physical process. In life, this has a powerful implication. You are not just watching your circumstances. You are influencing them through your choices, attention, and behavior. Blaming the world while ignoring your role in it is like blaming a mirror for your reflection. Light reflects interaction, not destiny. Now, step back and think about everything we have explored. Light is not a simple thing. It is a doorway into understanding space, time, energy, perception, and uncertainty. And in the same way, success is not a simple thing. It is not one habit, one idea, one strategy, or one breakthrough. It is a long process of aligning yourself with how reality actually works. Most people want shortcuts. Reality offers principles. Here is another uncomfortable truth. There are no secret tricks that reliably make people rich, just boring habits that prevent them from becoming poor. Just as there is no magic substance called light, just consistent physical laws that produce illumination. Now imagine you are sitting quiet night, looking up at the stars. Some of that light left those stars before you were born. Some of those stars may no longer exist, yet their light still reaches you. That means your experience of the universe is always a blend of past and present. The same is true of your life. Your current situation is shaped by decisions you made years ago. Your future will be shaped by decisions you make now that you may not feel immediately. Light makes this obvious. Life often hides it. So what does it mean to truly understand light? It does not mean memorizing equations or definitions. It means realizing that What seems simple, brightness contains layers of complexity that challenge your assumptions about reality. And that realization changes how you think about everything else. When you see a bright screen, you might remember that those colors are not inherent in the world, but constructed by your brain. When you feel certain about something, you might remember that even vision is indirect. When you feel impatient, you might remember that even light respects limits and delays. And when you feel overwhelmed, you might remember that simple rules, followed consistently, can produce extraordinary outcomes. Light does not seek recognition. It does not chase status. It does not panic. It does not get distracted. It simply follows reality's structure with perfect discipline. That is a model of intelligence worth reflecting on. Not because you should become like light, but because you should learn from it. Slow down. Look carefully. Question your assumptions. Respect time. Avoid obvious mistakes. Stay within what you truly understand. And remember that what you see is not the same as what exists. In the end, asking what is light really is not just a physics question. It is a question about how you perceive truth, how you navigate uncertainty, and how you live in a universe that is far stranger than it appears. The next time you flip a switch and a room fills with brightness, you might pause for half a second, not to feel amazed, but to think clearly. There is an invisible field everywhere around you, energy moving at a cosmic speed, ancient photons traveling across unimaginable distances, interacting with matter, shaping perception, revealing structure, and your mind quietly stitching it all together into something ordinary. If light can hide such depth behind such simplicity, imagine how much depth might be hidden behind the simple stories people tell about money, success, and life. Perhaps the real illumination is not just outside you. Perhaps it is in how you choose to think. And if you let that thought stay with you, calmly, patiently, without drama, you might find that seeing becomes a little clearer, not just in your eyes, but in your mind.